So, main topic for tonight. We're going to talk about Hanzo. We've had a chance to play Hanzo. I think I actually played in a couple games with Alebeard at BlizzCon. I can't remember if I played as Hanzo while we were playing together, but you know, if you're at BlizzCon playing on any of their test machines, you're playing either as or against or with Hanzos because they were running rampant, obviously being the new character. So we've had a lot of time to digest what Hanzo's going to be like. He's been on the PTR for the past couple of weeks as well, so everyone's had a lot of chance to play him. He's had some minor changes as well, and just as recently as a couple days ago, the PTR got patched, and he had across-the-board damage buff. Small damage buffs just to increase his output, which was identified, I'm sure, by most people as one of his lackluster points. He's a ranged assassin. We should see more damage out of him. So let's talk a little bit about Hanzo, the newest character from Overwatch. Before we start getting into the talking about him, we'll go over his talent and abilities, starting with one of his most interesting bits.
I do want to confirm for you, though, that game where the four of us played together at BlizzCon, you were indeed on Hanzo.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I think
because that was when Mystic was on Alex Straza.
Oh, okay.
I was flapping my arms like a dragon, you know.
Yeah, and it's interesting playing at BlizzCon because in general, like the hero just got released and you don't have too much time to look up talents or anything. So a lot of it, you're just scrambling to figure out which talents to pick. You're just testing things out. So it's kind of hard to get a good handle on the hero. And then also you don't want to be that guy who picks Hanzo every time. You want to let everyone else have a chance to try out the new heroes too. But still, we did get some playtime on Hanzo. And obviously over the past few weeks, we've had a ton of that.
Well, and you also never know who you're going to get matched with or against. I was coming out last year, and as I left the line and finished playing, MVP Rich and Sake were both leaving. So they had been randomly playing against whatever 5 unlucky people got matched against them. And then I played before with other people that had never played a game of Heroes. So, you know, you have a wide skill gap as well.
Yeah, for sure. And there's no matchmaking. Like you said, the matchmaking is the guy at the front of the line being like, hey, you 5 and you 5, go over there. And you're playing against each other.
If you guys think about it, it's like the real life Blizzard matchmaking simulator, right?
I'd like to think they've improved on it since then, hopefully.
Their matchmaking, as bad as their matchmaking is in ranked right now, it's definitely better than what we experienced at BlizzCon.
Yeah, I remember in one of the games we played in, I think it was me and Mystic were sitting next to each other. I looked to my left, the guy who we were playing against, and he must have been like 10 or 12 years old. And I was like, Mystic, like, take it easy on whoever that guy is. But I think they ended up actually being pretty good. So I think we might have actually lost that game at the end of it. I was worried it was going to be a stomp in the other direction, but hey, you never know. Those 12-year-olds today.
That was our miracle comeback. They started off really strong and he was playing well. And then something happened where he kind of got a little bit squirrely and we started picking him off over and over again.
Didn't we win that like right at the end?
We did.
We won that
right at the end, yeah.
You guys have an amazing memory for this kind of thing.
We were, I mean, how often do you get spanked by a 12-year-old and then win it just at the end because you win the team fight? Like, it's something you remember usually.
Well, I'm sure our listeners love this little stroll down memory lane we're taking here. But let's get into Hanzo. So first off, one of the things you'll notice right away if you haven't had a chance to play him yet is his auto attack damage per hit is actually pretty high. It's 183 at level 1. However, he only does 0.67 attacks per second. So it's awfully slow. And that's one of the largest criticisms I've heard about Hanzo is that he just feels kind of slow and clunky as like an auto attack assassin, quote unquote. However, I'll go over his abilities. Maybe we be the judge of that after we go over all this and we decide to talk about Hanzo and how he shakes out of the Nexus. So his Q ability is Stormbow. It's 15 mana, 4-second cooldown, so fairly spammable. You press Q and it actually charges up an arrow that damages the first enemy hit. The longer you charge your Q, the further the distance. The distance on it's about 70% more. Sorry, the damage is about 70% more than his auto attack, and the range on it is about 75% longer range at full charge. So it does have a bit more reach, and you can actually weave it into your auto attacks. We'll talk about that a little bit more later. So his W ability is called Scatter Arrow. It's 40 mana, 8-second cooldown. You shoot an arrow that deals a small amount of damage to the first enemy or hero hit. If it collides with terrain, and that includes like towers and forts, it doesn't actually do damage to them and just bounces off of them and splits into 5 arrows. And those arrows also ricochet off of impassable terrain as well. They'll bounce up to 4 times as long as they don't reach their max distance before hitting another wall or a target. The arrows, including the initial, do not pierce enemies. So if you use this skill and you hit a hero, you're doing a very small amount of damage. The way you maximize is by ricocheting it off a wall and getting it to split. Interestingly enough, too, Blizzard's added a new mechanic to the game in that the map will actually show wireframe borders around all of the terrain, so you can actually get a better idea of how that pool shot angle is going to line up. Apparently, they're going to be putting this into place as well for Junkrat and Lucio down the road. At least that's what they said. I don't believe that's in the PTR at the moment, but that's something they're looking at doing as well for wall riding and Junkrat bank shots as well. On his E, he's got Sonic Arrow. It's 50 mana, 20-second cooldown, so a hefty cooldown. You fire an arrow a long distance. The max range is about 3/4 of the new camera screen length. Whenever I talk about screen length for Hanzo, it's going to be according to the new camera because that's what he's going to be launched with. And it reveals enemies in an area for 1 second, so it'll reveal stealthies, and grant vision in that area for 8 seconds. The sight radius is slightly less than the sight radius for like a hero. If the arrow hits a target, it'll actually stick to the target too and move around with them, so you can't, kind of like a mobile ward. The shot does not tether too, so this is kind of interesting. If you try and shoot at a spot that's outside of your range, Hanzo will actually walk to where it becomes in range and shoot to that exact spot. So it won't just shoot to the end of the range, which is called tethering, like some of their abilities. I believe like Tyrael's Eldruin either does that or used to do that. I remember there was a change with that recently about the tethering. Okay, so his trait is called Natural Agility, and this I feel is one of the other clunkier things about his kit. It's on a 25-second cooldown. It's very similar to Genji's jump, except it has to be over unpathable terrain or structures. The range is roughly 2/3 of your vision range, so it's not a really long distance you can jump. And in order to jump over something, you have to make sure that when you press the D button to activate this, Hanzo is actually within range of the complete jump. So you have to make sure that you're in a spot where you can jump over the terrain and you can target to the spot you want to land. Because wherever you're targeting with your D, when you click the D button, that's the spot you're going to jump to. If it's not within range or you click on the unpathable terrain with your D button, it won't do anything. So it takes a little bit of getting used to, and you really have to know what his range is like in order to get the maximum value or get anything out of it. So something just to be really careful about with his D. And I remember on the BlizzCon floor, it was really tough to get used to at first. I couldn't figure out exactly how to use his D, like where you had to target. So there's something to keep in mind. He's got 2 ultimates, Dragon Strike and Dragon's Arrow. Dragon Strike, 100 mana, 100-second cooldown, hefty cooldown on it. After 1.5 seconds, so it's got quite the long wind up, you summon 2 dragons that travel forward, dealing decent damage to characters in the path. The damage ticks every 1/4 of a second, and enemies in the center take extra damage, 150% damage. His second ultimate, Dragon's Arrow, is 90 mana, 70-second cooldown. You fire an arrow, and it's got unlimited range. If it hits a hero, it does a pretty small amount of damage and stuns the hero for 0.5 seconds in that blast radius. It actually makes a blast radius around whoever it hits. If it travels at least 1/3 of a screen length, the damage actually doubles and becomes more significant, and the AoE stun becomes longer. It's 1.25 seconds. If it travels 2/3 of the screen length or more, the damage becomes really decent. The AoE stun becomes 2 seconds. Problem with this is it's hard to hit because it's not terribly fast. So you really have to, anticipate your target and make sure they're stun locked for a while. Okay, so that's his kit. We're going to talk about the talent tree in a second, but first let's talk about some first impressions of the character. So his auto attack. I did some number crunching for his auto attacks. Let's talk about that first. So I mentioned before, it's 183 attack damage, 0.67 attacks per second, so a very slow auto attack that hits hard. That calculates out to a DPS of about 122. Just for reference, that's 22% less than Raynor, and 16% less than Greymane in human form, 6% less than Vala with 0 stacks. So it's not actually a ton of DPS, which is interesting for an auto attack assassin. Blocks get good value against Hanzo because of his low attack speed. And another interesting point is he's got one of the longest ranged auto attacks in the game at 7.5. Standard range is about 5.5, and Raynor's actually a little bit harder than that, 6.5. So Hanzo's got like a decent range too. So Mystic, what do you think about his auto attacks? Like, is this a good thing, bad thing? Is it just something we'll have to get used to?
I think now that, he's been more fleshed out and we've played with him somewhat, I think it's okay. Like, because of the range, you can fire it from really far away. You have to choose when, you stop and shoot. So it kind of flows a little bit more with his kit, but I find it kind of funny that he has a symbol like right above his HP bar that actually shows the cooldown for his auto attack. That's how big it is. It's like, this is your entire thing that you have to wait before you can shoot another one. So I found that was kind of interesting.
How about you, Alebeard? What do you think about his auto attacks?
It's a weird balance between his auto attacks having such a long delay where you have to stand still and his Q where you can move while it charges. So it's like periods of movement and then long standing still and then movement. It's really weird. And if you haven't tried him, his auto attack is almost like Nova slow. It takes forever, it seems like, before it goes off. It didn't really click for me when I tried him at BlizzCon. I'm sure I'll play him when he comes out and we'll see. But it just, something about that, it was just a weird disconnect. It didn't really click for me when I tried him.
Yeah, I feel like his normal flow just feels a lot different than your average hero, so maybe it's just a matter of getting used to that. And right. Alebeard brings up a really good point that I didn't mention too. His Q ability, you can charge it while moving. It's just him like pulling the drawstring back. It takes maybe a couple seconds to get to max range, so you can actually reposition while you're holding the Q button to make sure that you can readjust and reposition accordingly. So Stormbow. I mean, one good thing about his auto attack speed is you can take his abilities like Stormbow, which is somewhat spammable at 4-second cooldown, and you can weave these into his auto attacks without missing an auto attack. So Stormbow, his Q, it does about, like I mentioned before, 70% more damage than an auto attack, and his DPS is fairly low without it. So it's important to make sure you weave these within your auto attacks. And you can do it without missing a beat because, like I said before, you've got enough time even to charge it up a little bit to get to about your auto attack range to try and hit heroes. It's a skill shot. It's not the easiest thing to land. However, if you do your Q, you can space in 3 auto attacks, Q, 3 auto attacks, and you can kind of get that repeating rhythm down. You can actually get fairly decent DPS out of them. The number it comes out to be is 286. This is at level 1. That's 20% more than Vala at full stacks, and only like 6% or so less than Greymane in Worgen form when he's got Inner Beast active, which is a lot of DPS, as everyone knows. So he can actually do a lot of DPS if you can hit those skill shots and weave them in accordingly. But easier said than done. He's a pretty high skill cap hero, feels like. Like, what are your thoughts on how he feels so far?
I think he feels clunky. I don't know. I think the comment about it feels like Nova's auto attack speed is about right. It may be faster, but it definitely feels like it. Yeah, I'm not digging him. But at the same time, I didn't like Hanzo when Hanzo came out. And now I like Hanzo. Or, I'm sorry. I said Hanzo. I didn't like Genji when Genji came out, but now I like Genji. So, maybe over time he'll grow. I mean, I don't know, man. It definitely feels weird.
I feel like that's one of the surprising things. Hanzo, just using the parallel of Genji for a second, they're brothers in Overwatch. They're both ninjas. They feel like they should probably feel very similar in terms of like their agility and finesse and movement, but where Genji feels very fluid and mobile, Hanzo certainly doesn't, because that escapability of his is pretty much his only movement ability that he has, and it's very conditional. Mystic, is this one of the higher skill cap heroes that we're seeing in release recently?
Yeah, he is. Well, he is pretty high skill cap, I'd like to say. However, in his current iteration, I don't know if he's worth that high skill cap. Like, even if you hit every single Q, you get like the pretty good scatter arrows off. I don't know. You could do the same thing just by playing Vala.
Right. I think that's a great point, though, because I think a long, long time ago, Duck Train coined the phrase burden of execution. And you can accomplish certain things with different heroes. And again, if you have a high skill cap hero, if another hero can do that same thing easier, why play that hero? That's kind of the dilemma that Rexxar has fallen into for a long time, where you can do great things with Rexxar, but someone else can probably do it with a lot less work.
Well, could it be just the fact that he's got a really unique E ability that gives sight at a distance? Like, I mean, maybe it's not necessarily unique because Chromie, I guess, technically has something fairly similar with her level 1 talent that you can take on her. However, I mean, you can have that mobile I say mobile, I guess he's not that mobile, but auto attack ranged assassin that could be used as a scouting tool as well. So maybe that's the niche they're trying to fill here with him, having a combination of damage and scouting ability.
Now, I think there's a stigma attached to this, but are any of you Hanzo mains in Overwatch? Like, does that affect how you feel like he clicks in heroes?
It could.
Well, I haven't played Overwatch probably in a year. I tried to spool it up at BlizzCon because I was like, you know what, you see all these like new cinematics and everything, you're like, oh, I want to try and like play some Overwatch, but the download was so big and the hotel Wi-Fi was so bad, it just took too long. And I mean, I've been dying to get back into Overwatch, but I remember playing Overwatch, and Genji and Hanzo were not ones on my radar typically. I like the slower, clunkier ones because my reflexes aren't what they used to be 10 years ago. So trying to like, you know, hit those skill shots and such are a little bit more difficult in like 3D space compared to something like Heroes.
Yeah, I just didn't know if this kind of awkward playstyle that seems so out of place to us would be more normal for someone that's played him in Overwatch, because I haven't really played him in Overwatch either.
Perhaps we'll have to correspond with some of our Overwatch fans to see what they think about that. So Scattershot's his final ability. Just a couple notes I had made about this too. If you are used to using Quick Cast, turn it off for Scattershot. Even just on release is fine, because it's one of those things that you really have to line up, and it's not necessarily intuitive where the skill shot's going to land. When you do use the targeting reticule or whatever you want to call it, it will actually show you where the bounces and the scatters go, which is really important. So turn off Quick Cast. It makes your life so much easier. Just do cast and release or just your standard cast. It is amazing, especially you can tell into it piercing later on in the game. And if you're in like those close quarters though, like Towers of Doom's amazing example of that, where you're in kind of like almost like a boxed area around one of the bell towers, you can shoot it one direction, it'll bounce back and forth, and if when they're piercing and they get more like piercing rounds, the more times they hit walls, you can actually get like streaking around like crazy and doing a decent amount of damage too. Like Alebeard, what do you think about Scattershot? Because I mean, it's a difficult ability to use effectively, but I've seen some people use it pretty well.
I love that ability. I think the mechanic is awesome, and like you said, you can pull off some amazing shots, and it's a great feeling when you can line up those banks just right and really get that damage multiplying. So even though, again, Hanzo didn't click for me that much when I tried him, I love that ability. I think it's a great ability.
Yeah, it's a neat one. I mean, I was never good at pools, so maybe that's my problem there. Trying to hit those bank shots is not the easiest thing in the world. But it's neat because it bounces off, like I said before, like towers, forts. So you can use that as well. Like if you're like just in lane in the beginning of the game, you can bank it off the fort behind a hero and it'll bounce back and hit him in the back or hit the whole team in the back too. So they're just interesting things that you can think of now that we've got these more bank shots in the game, like not only him, but something like Junkrat as well. So Mystic, how are the builds shaken out for Hanzo? Like, what are we seeing out there in terms of the popular builds?
Well, Daz, we have 3 builds that are kind of that Hanzo can use. We have the auto attack build, which makes his attack speed faster, but not that much faster. And then, you know, his auto attacks hit it a little bit harder. We have the Stormbow build, where you can just spam that Q and it pierces through one target, and it does a lot of wave clear. And then we have the Scatter Arrow build, where you can just throw that out constantly.
So is his Q build the only one that has any sort of option for wave clear? Because out of the gate, his wave clear is horrible. I mean, like, you've got single target damage. I mean, Scatter Arrow kind of can hit multiple targets once, but doesn't do enough damage to like be considerable wave clear. But is the Q build the only way you can potentially spec into having decent wave clear?
Yeah, because, well, his auto attack has a little bit, but I mean, killing one minion instantly every so often with his slow auto attack isn't exactly good wave clear. So I'd say his Q is the best option for wave clear.
All right, well, why don't we jump in to the talent tree so we can actually look at all the talents and figure out where they fit in, where the garbage talents are, where the go-to talents are. So we'll start with level 1. He's got target practice, simple geometry, and redemption. So target practice, these are all questing talents. Target practice, if you hit all enemy heroes, you increase the range of Stormbow by 30%. hit all 3 times, you increase the damage of Stormbolt by 100. Simple Geometry, again, another questing talent, but for his Scatter Arrow, hit a hero with multiple Scatter Arrows from the same cast 20 times, which is a little bit harder than you think. So you got to make sure it scatters, and it has to hit a hero more than once. Like 2 of the arrows have to hit him off the scatter. To get an additional 2 arrows added to the scatter as a reward. And finally, Redemption. Every 2 basic attacks against the same hero within 10 seconds grants 1 stack of Redemption. Once you get up to 12, you get an additional 50% attack speed. So his attack speed becomes a little less slow. These are kept until you die. In that situation, if you do die, you lose 3 stacks. So it sounds, well, you're like, hey, 2 basic attacks on the same hero within 10 seconds, that's not hard. But in a situation where you've got low attack speed, people are moving all over the place, it can be a little bit more difficult than it sounds. So right off the bat, the first thing I want to say before I throw this over to maybe Mystic to give his analysis on the level 1 talents is I took target practice, which is where you've got to hit all the enemy heroes with your Stormbolt to increase the range of it and the damage. I took it against an Abathur, and I regretted that one instantly. So make sure it's a case where you can hit all those heroes with your Stormbolt, because it's a wasted talent against a comp like an Abathur. Anyways, Mystic, what do you think we're looking at here? What talents are ones that we should be picking in which builds, or which ones should we be ignoring or going to altogether?
I mean, the first set here are pretty straightforward. If you're going for a Q build, then hitting all the heroes with the target practice build is the one to go. Simple Geometry for the W build, and then Redemption for the auto attack build here. I'd like to say target practice, unless you're up against an Abathur or something along those lines, right? It's actually not that hard to complete. You just gotta, like, chase it. It's like, okay, so I'm gonna hop these walls and I'm gonna go top lane or something, and then hit that guy once, and then go to the bot lane, hit these guys, and then you get that. It's not actually that hard of a quest to complete, unless they have that Abathur.
Yeah, having extra range I guess could be nice, but you're not always going up to your max range. But I guess the extra damage, 100 extra damage at level 1, I believe, is an extra about 30%, or maybe even more added to the damage on his Q. Well, what do you think about Redemption? As we've kind of made fun of it already, because you can increase your auto attack speed by 50%, taking your auto attack speed to 1 attack per second, which is still pretty slow. Once you get there, though, does it feel more like he's an auto attack assassin, or is this something that you can pull off?
When you have full stacks of Redemption, I don't know if they changed it since BlizzCon, because I haven't tried it after that, because I didn't really like the auto attack build, but what it felt like to me was that his attack speed was better. It didn't feel like normal to me still. It still felt like a little slower than normal, but it was manageable, that you could walk up auto attack and then back up a little bit auto attack. So
just in general, are you finding that a lot of your damage is coming from auto attacks, or is it ability damage? Like out of the gate, before you start talenting into stuff, like is Hanzo something we should consider an auto attack assassin, or does he have a lot of mage abilities like his Q and his W? Are those serious sources of damage? I know that at BlizzCon they talked about, I think, one of the developer breakout sessions, where the damage on Hanzo was coming and how they balance, and they wanted to try and be equal. But is that how he feels, that we're getting kind of equal damage from everything here? And is his auto attack something you should be investing in through the talent tree?
Honestly, if you ask me, I think most of the damage is going to come from your Q. And if you're minion blocked, or anything blocked, then a lot of that is just going to be going down the drain. The W build is you can get a lot of damage out of that, but only, obviously if they're in a bunch of quarters or whatever. And yet again, if they're not minion blocked or anything blocked. And then the auto attack build is kind of the more safe. You can auto attack through anything, right? So not a lot of damage you could get some damage out of that, but that's only if you can't get it anywhere else. So in summary, I think most of the damage is going to come from his Q. The other rest of it is going to come from his W, and then the auto is it's tacked on extra damage because the auto attack is so slow.
All right, well, let's move along to level 4. We've got explosive arrows, serrated arrows, and ignore all distractions. So explosive arrows, after hitting a minion or monster, this doesn't count for mercs, by the way, and I tested that to make sure. Stormbow deals 100% damage in an AoE around the target. If you hit the wizard minion in the middle, it'll hit all the minions as well. So you can actually, this is where Mystic was saying you get some wave clear out of Hanzo if you spec into that. Serrated arrows. Stormbow deals 150% more damage to minions, mercs, and monsters. And then finally, ignore all distractions. This is where basic attacks instantly kill minions and increases your auto attack range by 2 for 3 seconds once you do that. So is it safe to say that ignore all distractions is the auto attack bit and explosive arrows is the way to go for the Q build?
Yeah, and then I'm also going to mention that serrated arrows is actually not Stormbow, it's the W build, It's the scatter arrow. That one's actually pretty good because how scatter arrow works is that when you fire the first initial arrow, right, it hits the first enemy hero or wall, and then it splits up. So that doesn't count for minions or mercenaries, which means that let's just say you go to your siege camp, you can fire that scatter arrow, it'll go straight through the siege ogre, it'll hit the wall behind it, and then all of the scatter arrows will hit the ogre right in front of it. So you can just get the 5 arrow hit. So that's pretty good for merking, actually.
Yeah, good to know. To me, I thought that would have been more of the garbagey talent, considering everything here, but I guess there's a place for everything. That's what Blizzard's trying to accomplish. So on level 7, we've got Shieldbreaker arrows, the Dragon Hungers, and Never Outmatched. Shieldbreaker arrows, you get 250% bonus damage to shields when you're using your Q or your auto attacks. The Dragon Hungers, you get 5% spell power for 10 seconds when hitting a hero with Stormbow, and this stacks up to 20%, and Never Outmatched. This reduces Scatter Arrow's mana cost by half, and basic attacks lower the cooldown of Scatter Arrow by 4 seconds. Now, Scatter Arrow's only got a cooldown of 8 seconds, so a couple of auto attacks, you've suddenly got another Scatter Arrow up for grabs. So, what do you think on this level, Mystic?
I think the best ones here are, if you're going Q build, the Dragon Hungers, because that actually stacks up quite a bit. And 10 seconds is a long time, considering since you have 4-second cooldown on your Q, which means that you have the room to miss one and then charge up another one and hit the next one to keep your stack. And then Never Outmatched is actually really strong as well because Scatter Arrow, since it's kind of a low cooldown, but then you can auto attack and then get the cooldown reduction. It makes it so you can just spam the scatter arrow. And Shieldbreaker arrow, it's kind of situational, but it's very strong in that situational bit. Like if Tassadar shields a tracer and they hit him with a Q, with the Shieldbreaker arrow, then the shield is basically gone.
Do you guys think we're going to be seeing more of these Shieldbreaker style talents? I mean, we've got one with Varian. Now we've got one here as well. Is this going to be a trend, do you think, for counterplay? What do you think, LiQuiud?
It wouldn't surprise me. It definitely wouldn't surprise me. It's a way to counter the all the armor in the game and the armor changes that they put in the game. So yeah, it wouldn't surprise me if we saw more than that.
And you know what I was finding when I was playing Hanzo, Never Outmatched the cooldown reduction on his W. I was taking that even in the other builds as well, just because I found it was really useful to have so many more Ws to be able to weave in to your kind of just regular rhythm of play, and it was really useful for interrupting shrines and objectives. And like I said, you have them up almost every couple seconds, basically.
Right.
So what about his ultimates? I mean, we've already kind of talked about them a little bit. But we've got his 2 ultimates are Dragon Strike and Dragon's Arrow. So Dragon Strike, one of the problems I found with it is it takes a long time to wind up, 1.5 seconds. It doesn't actually start the dragons for a fairly decent range from Hanzo, so they have to be kind of far away before they actually start doing damage. And it goes really slowly, and I feel like the damage isn't high enough. Is this an underperforming talent? What do you think you've seen here, Alebeard? Do you think this is something that they need to buff? Do you like Dragon Strike as an ultimate?
I do think it feels really slow, so I think it could benefit maybe from being a little bit faster.
I think Mystic had an interesting idea off camera too. What was that, Mystic, you were talking to us about?
Well, either the cooldown reduction on it so that you can cast it, just more often, or the fact that if you are hit by Dragon Strike, as long as you're in the Dragon Strike, you're slowed by 20%, because that makes it so you can get hit by a few more ticks. But yeah, Alebeard saying that it could be faster is also a really good idea. It either dealing the damage faster or the dragon moving faster.
Just like in Overwatch, it's one of the most telegraphed abilities. He does this, really loud yell. I don't want to pretend to mimic it because I have no idea what he says in Japanese, but he yells it out. Everyone knows it's coming. You can see where Hanzo is. You got 1.5 seconds to get out of the way, and even if it starts going, and then you know where it is after the fact, all you have to do is move laterally. It's not like it chases you down or anything, right? So it gets really easy to get out of. LiQuiuD, do you see any use for this? I know you're a tank and you love your ETC mosh pits. Is this something that might be more of a wombo combo?
I think the only way to really use it is the wombo combo, but I don't know. We'll have to see. He still feels too clunky to me. I think Val is a better choice in almost every case than him. So we'll have to see.
We'll have a second ultimate here, Dragon's Arrow. This one, again, it's a little less of a cooldown, 70 seconds. It's got that global arrow. You can shoot right across the screen, increasing damage, increasing stun the further away it is. Mystic, is this, again, it's slow. The stun's kind of nice, but it's hard to hit. Is this a better option than the Dragon's Arrow, or does Hanzo just have two undertuned ultimates here?
I think this is 100% better than the other one, unless you have the wombo combo already set up. Like if you have the ETC or the famous Zarya, ultimate into Dragon Strike, right? It's pretty famous in Overwatch and it's wiped teams before. That's pretty good. Unless you have that completely set up, Dragon's Arrow is almost 100% the way to go, because not only is it an AoE stun, it does okay damage, but it's on quite a low cooldown as well, 70 seconds.
So how did you find yourself using Dragon Arrow? Because it's global, so you could throw it almost like a Tyrande, like across the whole map. The only problem is you can't guarantee anyone's going to be there when it hits, and it's an ultimate, so you don't want to use it, I guess, frequently as an owl. Or were you using it more in like close quarters or medium or short range to get the utility out of the stun and maybe the extra damage in a team fight situation?
See, that's the beauty of this ultimate. It's very, very versatile, and you don't have to even hit the target that you want to stun to actually, stun them, because the stun is AoE. So there's a lot of uses for this. You can go back to spawn, and then let's just say your top laner is laning, right? But they need that little bit of extra help that, to kill their lane opponent. So you just go back to spawn, line yourself up, just fire it down the lane, and just be like, if this hits, he dies, they lose a lot of soak, and then worth use of that ultimate. You got a bunch of value off of that. Or if you're in a team fight and you have to interrupt something, then you just fire it, and semi close to your target, it'll hit either your target or something close to your target, and it'll stun them anyway. And then you can also use it to snipe someone just across the map that's really low, and you're like, well, I think I can maybe hit it here, and you fire it, and then it'll kill him.
I guess the cooldown's low enough that you can afford to throw it out a little bit more on the Hail Mary passes, as opposed to making sure that it's something you save for that special moment which is what you have to do with those longer cooldown ultimates. So Dragon's Arrow's got a pretty interesting level 20 augment, which I guess we should probably mention now since we're talking about the ultimates. If his level 20 augment for Dragon's Arrow makes Hanzo become a global hero. It's called Play of the Game. So when the arrow is in flight, or up to 2 seconds after hitting the target, Hanzo can reactivate R and do this kind of cool jump back move from wherever the arrow was when you do it, to the location of Dragon Arrow. And since it's a global ability that goes the whole map, you can teleport to any spot on the map. If it's after the impact too, if it hits somebody, he'll actually shoot arrows at whoever was impacted at the target and do extra damage as well. So I was playing on Towers of Doom today as Hanzo, shot across the map. I don't even know if I hit the guy, but I pressed the R button. I got one bell tower on the south end, and then all of a sudden I was up at the north end, just almost like a flight from Falstad. It was a great global ability, and it does damage too. That I feel makes his ultimate even that much better. You don't necessarily want to wait to level 20 to be able to use to bank on the fact of it's going to become a global, but still it's a nice little augment to have. Okay, so going on to level 13. We've got Fleet of Foot, Ninja Assassin, and Mounted Archery. Fleet of Foot. Oh, LiQuiuD likes mounted archery, apparently. Did a little ninja move on screen.
Ninja Assassin.
Oh, Ninja Assassin. Well, you're a little delayed there. I thought it was for mounted archery. I was like, I don't know why the ninja move for mounted archery works, but hey. Okay.
If you want to pin mounted archery on someone, I like that.
I do too. So let's talk about.
I like the talent, but I mean Ninja Assassin, like
just like saying ninja
Assassin.
Right?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, I think I saw a B movie called Ninja Assassin. It was probably one of the best B movies I've ever seen. Just like a hack and slash ninja movie.
Wait, was that the? I think I saw the same.
Came
movie.
out about like 8 years ago, maybe.
Yes. Yeah. Okay.
So Fleet of Foot is the first one. Hitting heroes with Stormbow grants 10% movement speed for 6 seconds. This can stack 3 times up to 30%. Ninja Assassin. I probably just offended a whole bunch of people with that. Hitting heroes with Stormbow reduces the cooldown of natural agility by 10 seconds. It's normally on a 25-second cooldown. Hero takedowns reset the cooldown of natural agility. So a couple Stormbow hits, pretty much you got your natural agility back. This makes him a lot more mobile. Mounted Archery is a passive ability. Upon mounting, you gain an additional 30% movement speed for 5 seconds. And if you ever use natural agility, you instantly mount, making those escapes that much better. So Mystic, back to our resident diamond / hopefully master level player soon. What?
He has to play.
I know. When it's time to actually grind it out. What are we looking at level 13?
I'd say Mounted Archery is really good, because if you're not taking the Q build, then Fleet of Foot isn't as good. But if you are taking Q build, it's pretty good. You're moving at like mount speed while charging your Q. That's kind of insane. Yeah, Mounted Archery is the all-purpose use one. Ninja Assassin, I'd like to say, is okay. It's not as good as the other ones, but it's not that bad of a talent, especially if you're on a map with many walls.
So if you're looking for mobility, then I guess you're saying it just kind of depends on which build you're going. But I mean, the Mounted Archery is nice, because even just having that extra little boost of speed after you've mounted up to like get from like lane to lane, the extra 30% makes a big difference. Then jumping over a building to get instantly mounted, you can make a nice quick escape with that one. Alebeard, why do you like that one so much? Is there any specific reason that it kind of gelled with you?
Just the flavor of it, like you were saying, leaping over something and instantly mounting up, that just feels cool.
You know what I wish would happen? I wish the horse would appear like in the spot they were jumping to before you got there, so you'd actually like do like a jump onto the horse and then you'd like ride off.
Old West style. Now you've got to have a cowboy skin when you use that talent.
Yes.
Well, see, there's a whole synergy here. You talked about play of the game. So you play the game across the map, you kill Abathur, you jump over the wall, you instantly mount up, and you still make the objective on time.
It's like riding into the sunset. And again, the cowboy skin just makes so much sense there. So level 16, we've got Flawless Technique, Piercing Arrows, and Giant Slayer. These are all passives. So Stormbow, for Flawless Technique, Stormbow hitting heroes makes the next auto attack within 5 seconds increase the damage by 25%. And auto attacks grant 25% additional damage to the next Stormbow within 5 seconds. So it's kind of like a vice versa thing. So you actually get 25% more increased damage to your next Stormbow or auto attack, depending which way you do it. Boy, that's a hard one to explain. Piercing Arrows, Stormbow and Scatter Arrow can pierce one enemy. And every ricochet on Scatter Arrow grants an additional pierce. So you can get, up to, I think, 4 bounces on ricochets. So you can get up to 4 pierces on your piercing arrows. And then Giant Slayer is the final one in this talent tier. Scatter Arrow and auto attacks do an extra 1.25% of the maximum health in terms of bonus damage to enemies. So kind of like your giant killer there. The neat thing is that it does apply to Scatter Arrow as well. So Mystic, what are we looking at here, bud?
Flawless Technique is actually, I'd like to say, not as good as it sounds, because most of the time you're spamming Q anyway, instead of like, so you're queuing and you're using the maximum distance if you're using the Q build, and either you can get in and get that auto off maybe for that extra damage, or you're repositioning for your next Q because it's coming up so fast. So I find Flawless Technique, it's an okay talent if you can get it in there. Piercing Arrows is actually really good, because if the enemies are just clustered up in a corridor, then this will hit everybody really hard. And then Giant Slayer is also pretty good if you're taking the auto attack build because it affects auto attacks, or the scatter arrow build because your scatter arrow is up like very, very frequently.
I can see why they put piercing arrows and Giant Slayer on the same talent tier, because if you could take those both, that'd be pretty.
That would make him
Tanks
playable.
would be dead.
That would make him playable. People would pick him into double warrior comps, 100%. You would see him all the time if you could take them both.
Yeah, for those of you not seeing the synergy there, because you're getting, if you got piercing on your scatter arrow, that could pierce and potentially hit the same target up to 4 times. And 4 times, you know, what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 scatter arrows. If you talented in to get the extras to scatter arrows, you're looking at a lot of additional damage to any sort of tank or anybody in that, for that matter. So level 20, we already talked about play of the game, his augment to his Dragon's Arrow. The augment to Dragon Strike is called the Dragon Awakens. This is where Dragon Strike's cooldown is reduced by 5 seconds when a hero is hit with an auto attack, stormbow, or scatter arrow, which is all your abilities. We've got sharpened arrowheads. Enemies hit by scatter arrow cannot go above 0 armor. Nice little counterplay there. And bullseye. Sonic Arrow, this is the only talent that augments Sonic Arrow. It's kind of interesting to note. Sonic Arrow's speed and center radius are increased by 100%, and heroes hit by Sonic Arrow, good luck hitting a hero with Sonic Arrow, are stunned for 1 second. So Mystic, what are we looking at here?
So the Dragon Awakens is actually an insane talent. It's one of those where you're like, holy crap, this is a super good level 20 talent. But the Dragon Strike ultimate is okay if not comboed, a lot better if comboed, and this just makes it, you know, so you can fire them more often and it makes it come up a lot faster. But that's only if you pick Dragon Strike, whereas you have play of the game over here, which is much lower cooldown already, and it makes Hanzo a global, so that's probably the one that you want to go. Sharpened Arrowheads is, I think it's really good if you're fighting a lot of people with armor, like Garrosh. So if you fire it at Garrosh, then he is not a hero anymore. He's just a squishy. And then Bullseye is okay. It makes Scatter Arrow a lot more usable. Like, you can actually use the damage aspect. You can actually use the arrow tracking aspect, because the radius increase is actually quite noticeable, and it goes a lot faster, and the fact that it stuns is really nice.
So I feel like Sharpened Arrowhead's the one that makes it so that they can't go above 0 armor. I feel like any sort of counterplay talents are much more useful when they're, you know, at a lower talent tier level. Like, usually you find those level 13-ish. So seeing that level 20, I feel like it makes it almost a little bit lackluster, a little bit tough, because you can't necessarily bank on getting to level 20 at all, let alone, you know, picking a hero because of that. And similarly, too, you never want to pick an ultimate because of its level 20 augment making it OP in the case of Dragon Awakens. And this kind of reminds me of Zul'jin with his Taz Dingo. It becomes really great after level 20 because you get the health back. But between 10 and 20, that's when most of the game is fought and won. And you got to make sure that you have that good level 10, 20, and having your ultimate being hindered like that can be difficult. Alebeard, like, what do you think about these ultimates here? Which one would you pick?
Well, I think that I would go with play of the game and take the ultimate that synergizes with that. I think it's really tough in the fact that if you take Dragon Strike, you have to take the Dragon Awakens. You have no other options at 20. That's the only thing that makes that talent viable. So the fact that you are locked into something at 20 makes that level 10 option, I think, even less desirable. So I like play of the game, but I also like the situational ability of Sharpened Arrows, where you do have that option to chunk some people and get that armor down.
Oh, hell, that's a Garrosh melter right there, right?
Yeah, and he's everywhere, or banned.
Yeah, he's nowhere, right? That's the problem with Garrosh. Like, he's always banned first, and if you got first pick, you're like, oh, I want to play Garrosh, then the other team's going to ban him, and you're pretty much, you know, screwed if you want to see Garrosh in a game these days. All right, so that's basically our analysis of Hanzo. Maybe we'll take a little bit of a look at him again in a few weeks once he's actually been live for a bit, but I think we've got pretty good insights as to like how he's going to shake out. But before we move on to the next bit, what do you guys think in terms of how he's going to hit in terms of impact? Is he going to be overtuned, undertuned, just right? I mean, he did have those just like they dialed up the damage just a little bit recently. Maybe we'll start with LiQuiuD. Do you think he's going to be overtuned, undertuned, or just right?
He's undertuned right now. Well, let me rephrase that. He's undertuned for competitive. If they don't care about whether or not he's like first pick material, then he probably stays the way he is. But I feel like he's got to pump those numbers up.
How about you, Mystic?
I agree with LiQuiuD. I think he's undertuned right now, just because why pick him when you can pick all the other heroes that do like basically the same thing, have a better escape, or like, you know, do the same thing that he does just better.
Right.
So Alebeard does...
I mean, I want to throw. I'm gonna borrow the Vala thing because I think I don't remember which of you guys said it, but like Vala is a perfect example of this. Why would I ever pick Hanzo over Vala? I mean, I'm just not seeing a reason. I can play Vala safely, more safely than I can play Hanzo, and do more damage, and it's easier to do. Like, why would I ever do it?
Multi-shot is basically just AoE, you know, scatter arrow, except it always hits, right?
Right.
So Alebeard, you echoing the sentiment as well?
I do. I think he's going to debut really low because he has such a high skill cap and he's undertuned. That's going to be a real tough combination coming out of the gate.
So I guess one actual final question. What happens when you get this player into a pro's hands, like a Rich or someone who has that ability to take all this clunkiness we're talking about and weave it into finesse? Is he going to be strong? Because, I mean, you've got these heroes that are tough to play, like a Genji, for instance, that might not do as well in like lower level play, like, you know, pub leagues that we play in, but you got to get them into a pro's hands that can become overpowered.
Rich is a bad example. You can't use Rich. Rich can take any hero and do magic things with him. Like, if Bacon's watching right now, he's so happy, but you can't pick Rich. If you got to use like McIntyre or like just any solid player, period.
Ouch, shots fired at McIntyre too. Hope he's not watching.
No, I mean, like, I'm sorry. There's only one Rich in the world, right? We can all agree there's a reason that he ended up winning whatever it was, Blizzard's award for like best player or whatever it was. Like, it's Rich, okay? Any other character that plays a damage, I just picked McIntyre because I was thinking I'm like super excited that Heroes Hearth is coming back in January. Like, I'm stoked at him and Ishbu and BBJ and I'm sure
totally,
I'm not
accept
gonna forget
your
Crone,
apology.
but like I'm psyched that they're all in. Okay, but so here's my point I'm trying to make. If you ignore Rich because he does crazy stuff with crazy heroes that you would never put together, there's just not enough with Hanzo in his current state to do something cool with him unless you're a Rich or unless you have some crazy plan that like this comp with Hanzo does something crazy like a 4-minute Warhead Junction, right? Like, if for some reason if you draft this perfect comp, it just happens to work out so that it's like you can push down a lane so fast, it's insane. Like, but I just don't see it. But I guess that's my point. Like, somebody somewhere might see how that fits into this weird, bizarre comp. That's like, if you look at it, you're like, yeah, that's a cheese strat. That's where you might see something crazy happen with him. But where he sits right now, no.
A lot of people.
And it's really two different questions. Like, will Hanzo look good when Rich plays him? The answer is yes. So,
right.
Will Hanzo look good when regular competitive people play him? I think the jury is probably still out. I would lean towards no initially, but like LiQuiuD said, anything's possible once they get time to come up with some combos.
Right.
Well, hopefully he'll find his place because it's the last thing we want is one of these new heroes to get, old and dusty super quick. So moving